I'm happy to welcome you to my channel. I hope this story brings you something special and leaves a pleasant impression deep inside you. John Miller always joked that his suitcase knew more languages than he did. International contracts, building bridges, logistics hubs, and complex infrastructure knots pulled him from Seattle to Vancouver, to El Paso, to Lisbon. Business trips rolled in waves, 2 months. Then another 3, quick connections in Denver, breakfast at 5 in the morning, tangled time zones, and rooms without the smell of home. Claire got used to it. They learned to trade days as if they were coins. You give me Sunday evening, I'll give you all of Wednesday morning. In the living room stood a board with magnets. John at home, John on the road, John phone call at 8 p.m. Sometimes the on-the-road magnet hung so long it gathered dust, and then Tom called. John, the voice was strangely hushed. Buddy, this is awkward. But I saw Claire. She wasn't alone. A cafe on Pine Street. She was holding that guy's hand. They were laughing. The hotel room in Montreal felt tight. Out the window lay a cold morning, the river, and a bridge he was supposed to assess for reconstruction. John asked for a photo. Tom, half guilty, sent a blurry shot. Claire's profile, a cup of latte, someone's hand on the table. It could have been a brother, a colleague, an old school friend. It could have been anyone. For the first time in many years, John felt how the shadow of suspicion was scooping something out of him with a spoon. That night he bought a ticket, one way to Seattle. In his head it was simple. Arrive, talk, pack, no scandals, set boundaries, sign papers. Dignity is a kind of repair too, he thought. You just have to dismantle the old and raise the frame of the new. When he walked into the house, Claire was already waiting. She opened the door so quickly it was as if she had been listening to every bicycle bell on the street. Her hands were trembling. John noticed the succulents on the sill had withered, and she never forgot to water them. I should have said earlier, she began, not blinking. John, I'm pregnant. The words fell like knives sliding off the magnetic strip in the kitchen, as if someone had sharpened them in advance and only waited for them to strike the wooden floor. Congratulations, he said automatically. The voice sounded foreign even to him. And I don't know, her voice broke. I don't know if it's your child. Silence followed, long with a dull ringing in the ears. Then Claire, like someone standing at the edge of a platform and still saying, "Excuse me," added, "A DNA test is only after birth. I started therapy. I made a mistake, John. That's no excuse. But I was lonely. I'm not seeking pity. I want the truth. And I want you not to hate me. Whatever it turns out to be." He didn't throw a plate back at her. Or words. He just set his suitcase in the hallway without unzipping it. Oddly, at that moment he saw Claire press her palm to her belly and freeze, as if listening to something very small and important. John's gaze slid to her wrist, the thin thread of a pulse. Not now, he told himself. Don't turn her body into a battlefield. I'll stay, John finally said. At least until we know the truth. Are you serious? Her shoulders shuddered as if from cold. Serious. He took the guest room. At night the ceiling seemed lower than usual. In the darkness he heard drops clinking somewhere in the pipes. Barely audibly, he heard Claire crying into her pillow. The schedule changed. He declined business trips. He called his boss, and the bridge in Montreal would wait. family circumstances. Those two words can hold betrayals. Hopes, hospital wards, and shaking hands in the kitchen. The employer, used to American HR processes, silently agreed. John bought books about pregnancy. He read them at night, underlining things with a pen, not remembering that once he had stroked Claire's belly with the same tenderness and awe. Now everything was different, with movements as careful as those of a sapper. Claire often smiled past her strength. She went to a therapist, Dr. Grace Patterson, on the 6th floor of a brick building in Capitol Hill. John also signed up for a few sessions, but at the first he just stared out the window, where the stream of people under umbrellas moved and vanished. He wanted to come out on the other shore of that stream, but the river seemed boundless, the intrigue of every day. Life lived beside them like a third tenant. They lowered their voices when they entered the supermarket. They peered into strangers' faces in shop windows and wondered, is it him? She deleted some contacts from her phone. He accidentally saw torn-up cards in the trash that read baby shower. Claire had not sent them. At 20 weeks, the heartbeat sounded in the hospital. The walls seemed soft, and the machine pulsed with invisible waves of light. John stood beside her, holding Claire by the shoulders. He couldn't tear his eyes from the rhythmic thump. Thump, thump. It threw off his inner metronome, and then tuned it anew. At night, unable to sleep, he wrote a letter, not to anyone, but to the child. Hello, kid, I don't know who you are. I don't know whether there's a part of me in you. But I know I want to be the person who doesn't kill your heartbeat with anger. I don't promise to be perfect. I promise to be able to wait. He hid the letter on the top shelf among old appliance manuals. He thought, later I will print it. Later I will give it. If. That word lived in every pore of the house. Sometimes Claire caught him lingering on her and shifted the conversation to anything, like the weather, a streaming subscription, or a new palette for the kitchen. She was ashamed of her guilt like an invisible stain, and at the same time she thought about the child. Guilt and fear, 2 fingers of one hand, squeezed her throat. Tom wrote now and then. How are you holding up? John answered briefly. He still didn't ask why Tom had taken the photo back then and whether he had done anything else. One night the heating system whooshed as if ghosts were talking in the house. One of them sounded like Tom's voice. Maybe I meant her happiness. Maybe I'm jealous. John shuddered. Suspicions with many directions are a dangerous geometry. At 32 weeks, Claire felt ill. Her blood pressure rose, and there was a threat of preeclampsia. John drove her to the hospital, sat by the plastic chairs and gripped a cup of coffee by the handle. A nurse, a tall woman with a badge reading Megan, led him into the corridor and said briefly, "Stress is the main enemy, for both of you. Even if things are complicated between you, give her calm. She's hanging on by her last strength." John nodded silently, and in that nod was a decision. He would gather all the sharp corners around the house and cover them with soft pads, like young parents do before a baby starts crawling. Words are corners, too. He began to cook, without hiding that he was learning. The soups with avocado were not tasty, but they were healthy. He figured out how to wash delicate things. He learned to listen to Claire in the quiet hour between 1 and 2 in the morning, when she woke from her thoughts and started walking from room to room. "I'm not looking to you for forgive," she whispered in the darkness. "I'm looking to myself for don't do it again, and I don't know how to mount that inside me. Repetition is our enemy," he replied, "not memory." They found a family counselor, Mrs. Fields from Bainbridge Island, who took appointments online. On the screen, she looked like the stern aunt from children's books, who gives heavy but honest candies. She spoke of boundaries. What has been cannot be rewound, but it can be rebuilt. You can take out the trash, you can open the windows, you can compose a new contract in which the signature is a daily act. And if the baby isn't John's? Claire asked in one of the sessions. Then your boundaries will be different, Mrs. Fields said evenly, but they are still necessary. Your decisions are not punishments. They are a way to keep the soul alive. John noticed that each if changed his stance the way wind changes a sail's direction. He feared one thing, that he would sail too far and not return, even if someone called him home. But even more, he feared another thing, that by staying, he would lose his self-respect. The night before, the birth was stormy. Rain beat against the windows, as if someone were trying to claw their way inside. The lights flickered. When her waters broke, Claire said only one word: time. The road to the hospital was a wet ribbon. Hazard lights flashed. Claire breathed in rhythm beside him. John gripped the wheel, but he wasn't thinking about the car. He thought about that bridge in Montreal, where he was supposed to check the stability of the supports. Each support is years of planning, complex calculations, and the work of geologists. Why don't we do the same with people? He thought. Why do we assume everything will hold just like that? The labor was hard. Dr. Patel, the obstetrician with a poster on the wall reading "An inhale is a decision too," directed the process, held Claire's hand. He never thought he could fall apart and hold on, this tightly at the same time. When he heard the first cry, thin and indignant, it felt like his palms remembered that sound. A girl, someone said, "Congratulations." John looked at the baby's face. She seemed to him at once like everyone and like no one. Someone's wisps of hair, someone's shape of lips. He didn't want to guess. He wanted to wait. For a paper with numbers, they named her May. The genetic lab downtown worked without sentiment. Result in 5 days, they said dryly. 5 days stretched like 5 years. Claire tried to sleep, but May cried at night. John discovered that lullabies are not about songs. They are about the rhythm of a heart. He carried his daughter around the room, counted steps, and walked in circles like a firefighter holding the fire line. On the 4th day, Tom called. John didn't pick up on. The 5th, a letter arrived. John pressed it to his chest and realized he still had a heart, capable of tapping Morse open. He tore the paper and read, "Positive paternity. John Miller, 99.9%. He sank into a chair. The world hadn't changed. The walls were the same. The quiet was just as lively. May breathed with little hoots. But in him something settled into place, as if a concrete block in his heart had found the right ledge and become part of the structure. Claire walked in, holding a cup of tea, and she understood without words. She simply hugged him and rested her cheek on his shoulder. Their shadows on the floor finally overlapped, without a shift. "This doesn't erase what I did," she whispered. "This doesn't erase what I felt," he answered, quietly. "But it gives us a chance," Claire said. "Yes," John said. "And it gives me an answer to the question, how do I forgive?" "And how?" she asked, stepping back a pace. "Not at once, not necessarily, beautifully, and not as a gift to you," he said with a slanting smile. "As May's right to live in a home where doors don't slam. You might think it was easy from then on. In fact, it wasn't. Forgiveness is an arboretum after a storm. Branches lie everywhere, and on each is written, "Why me? How could you? How could I not see? They cleaned that park. Together." Claire stopped averting her eyes when she spoke. John learned to say not you betrayed, but it hurt me. When they set rules, full transparency in messages, time for the two of us every Saturday, joint therapy once every 2 weeks. Yet at times the shadow returned. Once, when Claire answered a message late at night, John suddenly felt a lump in his throat. It was a concentration of tension, as if someone had touched an old scar. He didn't scold himself for it. He just named it. Fear. Claire put the phone down, came over, and took his hand. "Look," she said, unlocking the screen and handing it to him. "It's a chat with my sister." "Thank you," he said, and he didn't check. Trust is not an audit. It is the slow repetition of gestures that one day will again become natural. They moved. Not far, to West Seattle, closer to the port where you hear the horns every morning. The change of landscape helped the brain stop associating every corner with a painful scene. The new walls smelled of paint. The new floor didn't remember their quarrels. The new balcony hadn't heard night confessions. John went back to work, but now he took fewer long trips. The company proposed a hybrid format. He curated projects in Portland and Sacramento, which allowed him to be home every week. There was a little less money, but more oxygen in the air. One day in May, when little May had already learned to roll over and looked sternly at anyone who didn't give her a rattle, the doorbell rang. Tom stood on the threshold. He held a small package, a plush whale. "May I?" he asked carefully. Claire went to the bedroom with May. John invited his friend into the kitchen. The cat lazily hopped off a chair, as if freeing a seat for other people's conversations. "I came to apologize," Tom began, "and explain. Then at the café, I saw not what I thought, or the same thing, but not the whole frame. They were just sitting close. You know how the eye makes conclusions for us. I was out of order. I was angry at my life, at my ex, at that month of rains, and I made a move as if I were saving you. In fact, I was saving myself. You sent a photo." John reminded him calmly. "Yes, I became the guy who pokes a finger at someone else's scar. I'm sorry. I don't know whether it was you who set off the avalanche," John said honestly. "But the avalanche came down. And if you think I didn't hear something else in your voice, maybe you were jealous too." Tom exhaled and nodded. It became clear that each of them is not just a role in someone else's story, but a person with his own fatigue, foolishness, and hopes. "Thanks for coming," John said at last. "The whale stays here, but our boundaries are here." He tapped the table lightly. "From now on, I don't want off-script commentators in my family." Tom left the gift and went. Claire came out, holding May to herself. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Yes," John answered. "I just closed one old tab. Forgiveness is not a reset button. It is a craft, and it is made of little things." An early Tuesday when John gives Claire 20 minutes of quiet, taking May to the waterfront to listen to the gulls. A Friday when Claire sits beside John while he reviews bridge drawings at home and asks what she calls silly questions. And it turns out he has missed a small detail. A new rule. Not going to bed with a pulse over 80, as the counselor joked. Don't fall asleep angry. The heart has the right to rest. Small thank yous for Caterpillar crawling under the blanket, for funny photos of tousled May, for coffee in a travel mug in the car. the consent to raise old topics from time to time, but to do it like archaeologists in gloves and with a brush, so as not to break things, Claire said in one of the sessions. For a long time I thought forgiveness was a gift to the guilt. It turned out to be a gift to the future. I don't deserve it, but our path does. John added, and it's also a discipline. Sometimes I wake up and don't want to be magnanimous. Then I still choose not to break what we're building. There are parallel lives we didn't live, and now and then we glance at them as at a reflection in a shop window in one of those lives. The DNA test could have shown a different result. John tried to imagine what he would have done then. Perhaps they would have parted, not with shouting, but with sadness. He would pay child support for a child he didn't beget, but whom he couldn't help seeing in the mirror of their home. Claire would stay with May and build up her independence. They would learn to tell each other goodbye as disciplinarily as they now learn to say, "I'm here." Strangely, that thought no longer cut so sharply. The main thing wasn't whose child it is, but what kind of adulthood it should be. In both scenarios, it demanded the same qualities: honesty, boundaries, care for oneself, respect for the other person, even if she hurt you. That evening, John told Claire about his parallel story. "I'm glad we aren't there," she said. "But I'm grateful you walk that road in your mind. It means you know why. You're here," he smiled. "The ability to see possible futures is also a way to love the present." Autumn smelled of wood and gasoline. John stood on a bridge again, now not in Montreal, but at a new site near Portland. Reflective stripes shone on his sleeves, and a tablet with plans was in his hands. He inspected load-bearing beams and thought of home. He thought of May, already trying to fish nuts out of a bowl, and of Claire learning to trust herself again. The foreman, a weathered man named Lucas, came up and nodded at the structure. "Nice piece of work. It will withstand any wind if you set the joints right." "The joints are the main thing," John agreed. "And the balances," Lucas added. "If one support takes too much on itself, the others sag." John laughed. "You sound like a family counselor." "Been married 3 times, Lucas replied with a glint. "So I've got a diploma." That day John came home early. Claire was baking an apple pie. They put May in a high chair, and she made faces at the smell of cinnamon. John talked about the bridge. Claire talked about May's new words. Da-da-da, the universal answer to everything. Dinner was simple, but there was a note of long-forgotten lightness in the taste. "I'm sometimes afraid that in a moment everything will collapse again," Claire said. "That fear sits somewhere here." She touched her chest, like a timer. "Fear is not a prophet," John replied. "It's just a signal, and we aren't who we were. We have instructions in case of fire and an emergency. Exit. And we have a desire not to test the fire. Extinguishers every day." They laughed. The laughter didn't sound like the noise of cleaning. It sounded like music. When May turned 1, John took that letter down from the top shelf. The edges had yellowed, as if it had lived longer than the calendar counted. He reread it and added new lines. "Hello, May. I'm still learning to be a person who chooses not to take revenge. I'm still learning to love not as a reward, but as a craft. Your mother did something that can't be fixed with tape. Yet we chose not to ruin further. We make this choice every day, between I'm right and we have a future. If you ever ask whether it's hard to forgive, I'll say yes. It's like building bridges in a storm. Sometimes the storm is exactly when you must build, because you will have to cross to the other side. He slipped the letter into a new envelope and wrote, "When you can read, open." He thought that maybe one story would be enough for her someday to choose not to repeat other people's mistakes. A few years later in Santa Monica, the three of them stood at a crosswalk. The light took a long time to change. Cars flowed by, but no one honked, the usual California stream. May squeezed her mother's hand and asked, "Dad, when will it be green?" "When it's time," he answered. Sometimes we wait not because the light is mean, but because it keeps us safe. Claire looked at him with the faintest smile. Their long and painful red had once turned to yellow, to attention and caution, and then to green. No one lunged blindly ahead. They just crossed together, steadily, in step. On the beach, May ran after seagulls. John placed his hand on Claire's shoulder and thought, "Every family has its bridges. Some are concrete, some are made of trust that looks thin until you feel how firmly it holds." "Do you remember how it all started?" Claire asked, watching the waves. "I remember," he answered. "And I remember how we decided not to let it be our end. Not because we're saints, but because we're builders. And we know how to say, 'Let's try again.'" They sat on the sand. The wind calmed. A shadow from a pelican's wing lay beside them. John brushed Claire's hair from her face and felt that in that motion there was not only tenderness, but a multitude of little befores and afters from which the big us is made. The light on the promenade changed again, and someone in the crowd sighed with relief. Stories have their green lights too. Sometimes they switch on not when we want, but when they do, we must have the courage to take a step. The heart of this story lies in choice. It lies in the choice not to deny pain, but not to let it be the architect of the future either. It lies in the choice to name boundaries and to give a chance. Even in the choice, if you had to part, to do it with dignity, leaving a child not a battlefield but a map of paths. Sometimes the greatest question is not whose child it is, but who we will become when we take off our heroic masks and remain simply people, building a bridge over the narrowest place between yesterday and tomorrow.